You open your banking app without thinking too much about it. Just a quick check. Nothing urgent. No alerts. No problems. You scroll through your recent transactions. Coffee. A subscription. A slightly nicer version of something you needed anyway. A delivery fee you didn't think twice about. A small upgrade here, a convenience there. There's no single purchase that stands out, nothing that feels irresponsible. Nothing that makes you pause and think, that was a mistake. And yet when you glance at the total you've spent this month, something doesn't feel right. It's higher than you expected. Not dramatically. Not alarmingly. Just consistently higher. And that's the part that lingers because you don't feel like someone who spends too much. You didn't make a bad decision. You made 100 decisions that all felt reasonable, and somehow that was enough. My name is Theo, and I spend a lot of time thinking about why the smallest, most reasonable choices we make quietly shape the entire direction of our financial lives. If you've ever felt like your money disappears without a clear reason, like you're doing everything right, but still not moving forward, go ahead and press like and subscribe if this video helps you see something you hadn't noticed before. Because what we're going to explore here isn't about discipline. It's not about cutting everything out. It's about understanding a system that most people don't even realize they're inside. At first glance, it feels like you're in control. You don't have large, reckless purchases. You don't carry obvious financial chaos. You're aware of your spending. You check your accounts. You make adjustments when things seem off. It feels responsible. But here's the quiet shift. You're not actually controlling your spending. You're controlling what's easy to see. Large expenses are visible. They demand attention. They trigger thought. They feel like decisions. Small upgrades don't. They slide through without resistance. It doesn't feel like a decision when you tap upgrade shipping to get something faster. It doesn't feel like a decision when you choose the slightly better seat, the slightly better plan, the slightly better version. It feels like a preference. And preferences don't feel like financial behavior, but they are. Because while you're focusing on the visible decisions, something else is happening underneath. A pattern is forming. And the pattern doesn't need your attention to grow. This pattern builds itself. You didn't choose it. It formed around you. Think about how most apps are designed. You open a food delivery app, and the default option isn't the cheapest one. It's the one that's slightly better, slightly faster, slightly more convenient. The cheaper option is there, but it's just a little harder to reach. One extra tap, one extra scroll, one extra second of thought, and that's all it takes. Because your brain isn't optimizing for cost in that moment, it's optimizing for ease. So you don't feel like you're choosing the more expensive option. You feel like you're avoiding a small inconvenience. And that's a very different experience. Because avoiding inconvenience feels neutral. It doesn't feel like spending. It feels like smoothing your day. But when that experience repeats itself dozens of times, it stops being neutral. It becomes a system, and the system has a direction. There's another layer to this that's even quieter, the friction problem. The cheaper option almost always asks for something small in return. A little more time, a little more effort, a little more uncertainty. Maybe the delivery takes longer. Maybe the interface is less smooth. Maybe the process is just slightly more annoying. Individually, none of these trade-offs feel worth it. Why wait longer for something when you can have it now? Why deal with inconvenience when the better option is right there? So you don't think of it as choosing the expensive option. You think of it as choosing the reasonable one. And again, it doesn't feel like a decision, but every time you remove friction, you add cost. And when that trade happens automatically, over and over again, it becomes invisible. You stop noticing it entirely. Which leads to something most people never really confront. The monthly blind spot. You see your transactions one by one. But you almost never see them as a pattern. Because each one is too small to matter on its own. There's no emotional signal, no pain, no hesitation, so your brain doesn't flag it as important. But when you zoom out, when you actually look at the total across a month or a year, that's when the pattern becomes visible. And by then, it feels confusing, because there's no clear cause. No single decision to point to, just a quiet accumulation. And that's what makes it so hard to change. Because you can't fix what you don't experience as a problem in real time. You only see it after the fact. And by then, the system has already done its work. Over time, something else begins to shift. Your identity. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a conscious way, but in small, repeated signals. You start to see yourself as someone who chooses the slightly better version. Not the luxury version, not the extravagant option. Just a little better, a little faster, a little easier. And that identity feels reasonable, it feels earned. It feels like progress. But identity is powerful because it doesn't just reflect behavior, it drives it. Once you see yourself that way, the cheaper option starts to feel slightly out of place. Not wrong. Just not you, so you don't actively reject it. You just stop considering it, and when that happens, your baseline shifts. The upgraded option becomes normal. The normal option becomes invisible. And again, you didn't choose this, it formed around you. This is where the real insight begins to take shape. Most people think about compounding in terms of money. Interest rates, investments, growth over time. But there's another form of compounding happening all the time. Behavioral compounding. Every time you make a small upgrade, you slightly increase the likelihood of making the same kind of upgrade again. Because you've reduced the psychological resistance. You've normalized the behavior. You've reinforced the identity, so the next time the choice appears, it feels even less like a decision and more like a default. That's how the system sustains itself, not through big moments, but through repeated ease. Let me show you what this looks like over time. There's someone I want you to think about. His name is Marcus. Marcus is not a big spender. He doesn't buy luxury watches. He doesn't drive expensive cars. He doesn't go on extravagant vacations. If you looked at his life from the outside, you'd say he's financially responsible, careful, even. But Marcus has a pattern. He values convenience. He likes things to be smooth, efficient, predictable. So when he orders something, he almost always chooses faster shipping. When he travels, he upgrades just enough to be comfortable. When he subscribes to something, he picks the version that just works better. None of these decisions feel excessive. They feel practical. And over the course of a week, they barely register. Over the course of a month, they blend together. Over the course of a year, they become substantial. But Marcus doesn't see it that way. Because there's never a moment where it feels like he's overspending. There's just a continuous stream of reasonable choices. 10 years pass. Marcus's income has grown. He's more stable, more experienced. From the outside, it looks like he should be far ahead. But when you look closer, something is off. His financial position hasn't changed as much as you'd expect. He's not struggling, but he's not free either. He's maintained a certain level without breaking through it. And the reason isn't something dramatic. It's not a bad investment. It's not a crisis. It's not even a mistake. It's the system. The invisible system of spending that quietly scaled with him. Every time his income increased, his pattern had room to expand. More upgrades, more convenience, more reasonable improvements. And because it all felt justified, it never triggered change. This is the hidden trade-off most people don't see. Every small upgrade feels like a gain in the moment. Better experience, less friction, more comfort. But what you don't see is what you're giving up. Not immediately, but cumulatively. Because every extra dollar that goes toward convenience is a dollar that doesn't build future freedom. And the trade-off doesn't feel real because it's delayed. It doesn't show up in your day, it shows up in your trajectory. So instead of asking, is this worth it? There's a different question that reveals the system. How many times will I repeat this? Because almost anything can be worth it once. But very few things remain invisible when repeated hundreds of times. That's where the clarity begins. Not in the individual decision, but in the pattern behind it. And once you start seeing patterns, you realize something important. You don't need to control every decision. You need to redesign the system that produces them. Because willpower doesn't scale, but systems do. If the default option in your environment is the upgraded version, you'll drift upward in spending without noticing. If convenience is always one tap away, you'll choose it more often than you intend. If friction only exists on the cheaper path, you'll avoid it automatically. So the shift isn't about saying no more often. It's about changing what happens when you don't think at all. You can start small. Make the cheaper option easier to reach. Set your defaults to the basic version. Turn off auto upgrades. Add a pause before certain choices. Not a big one. Just enough to make the moment visible. Because right now, the system works because it's invisible. It doesn't feel like a decision. So you don't treat it like one. But the moment you introduce a little friction, a little awareness, the pattern starts to slow down. Not because you forced it, but because you finally saw it. You can also shift what you track. Instead of reviewing transactions one by one, start looking for patterns. How often do you upgrade? How often do you pay for speed, convenience, or comfort? Not to judge it, just to see it. Because once you see repetition, it's harder to ignore. And over time, you can create a simple rule. Upgrades require a reason, not a feeling, not a default, a reason. Something specific, something you can explain. And if there's no reason, the system chooses for you. Not the expensive option, the intentional one. Because the goal isn't to eliminate convenience. It's to stop accepting it automatically. That's the shift. And it leads to a realization that most people never quite articulate. You're not stuck because of what you can't afford. You're stuck because of what you automatically accept. And once you see that, everything changes a little. Not dramatically, not overnight, but quietly. Because now when you open your app, and you scroll through those small, reasonable transactions, they don't feel random anymore. They feel connected. They feel like part of something. And that awareness is the beginning of control. Not control over every decision, but control over the system that makes them. And you don't have to fix everything. You don't have to overhaul your life. You don't have to cut out every small comfort. You just have to see what's been shaping your behavior without asking for your permission. Because once you see the system, you're no longer fully inside it, and that's enough to start changing where it leads. Thank you so much for watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe to see the latest videos. I wish you success.